Hey, thanks everybody for coming. Again, I'm John Lovett. I'm a GIS analyst with the Wildlife Resources Commission. Our headquarters is on NC State's campus in Raleigh. As kind of has been the topic of a lot of the conversations that we've had today and yesterday, this talk is about taking advantage of best available data and best available tools as GIS analysts trying to help the public and ourselves and our coworkers, specifically in this case with building a permitting system within the NC State government and ArcGIS online environments that we are currently licensed under. Quick overview and also an opportunity to show some nice wildlife pictures. I'll talk a little bit about Wildlife Resources Commission and our boating access area permitting system, as well as some of the wants, needs, and limitations of the past system and then the new system that we've developed, and then wrap up with some questions and answers, hopefully. So North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission is the regulatory agency responsible for the state's fishing, hunting, trapping, and boating laws, and we're responsible for much of the public land on which those activities take place. We manage about 2 million acres of land across the state in 94 game lands. We own we are allocated about 540,000 of those acres by the state government, and then an additional almost 1.5 million acres of federal land, largely in the western part of the state, is also enrolled in our game lands program. Outside of the folks that we have in the Raleigh office, we have work crews at 31 management depots across the state, and they're responsible for infrastructure management of over 500 boating and fishing access areas, over 2,100 waterway markers on lakes and rivers, as well as dove fields, waterfowl impoundments, disabled sportsman blinds, observation decks, and many more. And I should mention our GIS team is 2 folks. When I started in 2020, I doubled the size of our GIS program from 1 to 2. So we have been doing a lot of work over the past few years to enable our field staff to better update their own data to help us, help them kind of thing. A lot of field application development, surveys, things like that. I don't know about you all, but as a GIS analyst who loved making maps, I don't often make that many maps anymore. It's a lot of web applications and things like that. I see nodding heads, so yeah, I'm not the only one. Specifically, our boating access areas, there's 255 of them across the state. These are areas where folks launch their motorized boats onto water bodies, rivers, lakes, et cetera. 95 of them are owned by the Wildlife Commission. The rest were either built or are maintained by wildlife, and are partnerships with federal, state, local, and private entities. They provide access to inland, joint, and coastal waters, and they vary greatly in size, number of access ramps, parking spaces, amenities, etc. Just kind of a look at what some of these look like. Smaller, like single access ramps like this with gravel parking lots. Some have fishing docks on them or kind of floating access piers. And then we have some much larger operations like this with multiple parking spots for trucks and trailers, multiple launch ramps, fun stuff like that. So permitted activities at boating access areas. By administrative code, BAA permits are required to ensure that only allowable activities occur at these access areas. The Wildlife Commission issues permits at no fee. Largely these are issued for fishing tournaments, but there's also things like construction or other events that take place that require permits. And they're broken down into 2 categories, which are weigh-in permits and special use permits. In general, weigh-in permits are for these like less than 24-hour fishing tournaments that happen with some regularity, and then special use permits capture other activities that either extend over a larger period of time or have other special requirements. Not all of these BAAs are owned by the Wildlife Commission, and for ramps that are not wholly owned by the commission, the owner of that ramp needs to be notified and may require an additional permit from the user. And I think one thing that is especially important here, and we'll come back to later, is that boating access area permits are not reservations. They are just a permit that says you have informed us that you're going to use this ramp for an allowable activity, and we have that information on file. So previously our system was this nice 1990s looking form-based system that was built by our IT department, tied into a database that they managed, and it worked for a long time. It could still function well, where users would go in and they'd put in general contact information about their organization, contact information for themselves. They would select the type of permit that they were trying to get, which did require knowledge on their part of whether their permit was going to be a weigh-in permit or a special use permit. And then they would enter information about the event itself. The way that this system was set up, it did allow users to input like repeat events. So if someone was going to have a fishing tournament every Thursday of the spring, they could go in and enter a date and select the ramp and continue to populate down the form here. What else is going to add to that? Oh, but it was a little difficult. I mean, you wouldn't see until you input your information here, you wouldn't see if there was another permit issued that ramp until you started putting your information in here. The system then, on the internal side, the staff would get a notice that, or an administrative staff member in the Raleigh office would get a notice that a new permit request came in, and they had to take that data and populate a PDF with the contact information, information about the event itself, and then kind of the regulations involved, and then either email or actual hard copy mail that permit to the permit requester. So the previous system, some of the public complaints that we got was that some requesters would spam reservations for a ramp and may not actually use it on those dates, but they would go in and like, because I can put in every Thursday for the whole year, I'm gonna request access at this ramp every Thursday for a whole year. And so that actually led to fist fights in a couple cases and things like that. It was difficult to view other reservations, as I mentioned, until you started putting in all of your information. And this system operated on a calendar year basis, so on January 1 of every year, people could go in and start inputting their requests for that year, which also leads into an internal complaint. January 1 rolled around, and a huge influx of permit requests would come in. They could take up to 10 minutes per permit to process by our staff, which occasionally some years led to the need to hire temporary staff to just help process these permits on top of all the other duties that this administrative staff member has. And I mentioned it already, but these permits had to be printed on letterhead and either mailed or emailed to the requester. So what does the ideal new system look like? And also, like, beyond that, getting back to kind of the point of this talk, what is the most actionable new system? Like, what is the system that we could put together with the software, data, and skills that we had on hand? Ideally, after like lots of conversations, it would have been great to have something that's like, you know, you go on the web and you want to like book a hotel room. I just go into kayak.com and put in Winston-Salem for this week to see, you know, think about this in a boating access permit context, and I know I want to have an event on today in Winston-Salem, and I can see where all the ramps are and see, like, in this case, cost, but you get the point. The hotel reservation style system would have been really cool, but I mentioned earlier, they're not really reservations. They're just issued permits, and unfortunately, our IT staff didn't have the capacity to build a system like this on top of all their other duties. Our GIS staff, which I should mention, we sit separately from our IT staff. We're not in our IT division. So separately, also our GIS staff I'll admit I don't have the skills to build something like that. And funding wasn't available to contract this kind of build out externally. And then the free, or in this case, already licensed tools are limited and can't actually do that. So we started asking the questions, like this was 3 years ago. After every year we'd get that huge influx of permits, and our multiple admin staff in the same position would be like, this is awful. I'm sitting here day after day processing these permits. They take like 5 to 10 minutes per permit to just print out. Like, why can't we streamline this system? And after a couple iterations of like poking around in, oh, we can do this, and ArcGIS Online maybe, and failing a couple times, we finally got back around to really approaching, what in this case I'm calling the best available solution. So our boating access areas as points are already hosted in ArcGIS Online. Survey123 is relatively easy to set up as a form-based public data collection tool that can then be linked to all of these boating access areas. We've got great tools like dashboards and Experience Builder that can be used to visualize the data. And after playing around with Power Automate for a couple other applications, learned some of the ways that we can use that tool as well to do automated email notifications that are triggered directly from Survey123. So we got to the point where we actually sat down and really thought about what is the workflow of this new process look like, and we came up with this. Users first can view existing permits and request permits for events through an Experience Builder application. It was really important to us to be able to show the public where permits were already issued so that they were better informed ahead of time where there might be conflict in a general sense, where there might be other people using a ramp or a body of water at the same time. Permits could then be submitted via Survey123 with some internal logic in the surveys to determine whether they should be a weigh-in permit or a special use permit, and the public didn't have to know which one they were requesting. It was just a very simple, a couple yes/no questions, and the system can determine which type of permit needs to be issued. Then after that survey is submitted, it can trigger a flow in Power Automate, which in the case of weigh-in permits, once you submit, if it's a weigh-in permit, then it's issued. It meets all of our criteria for weigh-in permit, and we can just go ahead and structure an email and send it directly to the submitter, and then copy wildlife staff as an issued permit. If it was a special use permit, then emails could be sent to regional staff to prompt approval, and a second email could be sent to the submitter acknowledging that we got their permit request and that it was under review. Then we also wanted to build an internal Experience Builder application to allow staff to interact with these data, and then do the approval for these special use permits. And finally, tying all of this in together, we wanted a better way for staff to interact with the permits. Like if our enforcement staff were going out to a ramp and there was an issue, they could look and see, is a permit issued? Who is the permit holder here? What are they permitted to be doing versus what is actually happening on the ramp? So from here, I'm going to go through just some screenshots of the system that we built out and talk a little bit about some of the key points that we wanted to build in here, and maybe spark some ideas for you all as well. So this is the public view of the permitting application. I skipped past the splash screen here, but there's a splash screen with a little bit of information about permitting itself, and it's just linked directly from our boating access area page on the web. It's got a list of issued permits here with whether it's a special use or a weigh-in permit. Use some fun arcade stuff to change the color there, whether it's special use or weigh-in, as well as the starting time of the permit and then how long the permit is issued for. Some of these year-long ones are for construction projects that are happening at ramps, and then a lot of these other ones, and then it's sorted by when the event starts. As you zoom in on the map or use any of the filters up here, this permit list updates to show just the boating access areas that are within the map view or within the filters. And so if I was not particular about which ramp I wanted to use on, what do I have here? Falls Lake, I could just zoom into Falls Lake and see the issued permits there. And then additionally, when you click on a specific ramp, you only see the permits issued for that ramp, and you also get the pop-up, which we kind of organized with the most important or most relevant data at the top, including any caution notes about, in this case, only 52 parking spaces are available because of construction happening at the ramp. And this is just a dashboard. This lower chunk is a dashboard sitting inside Experience Builder. So after the public goes through here, gets well informed about what's going on at ramps already, what's already permitted, they can go to the Request a Permit page, which is Survey 123 and a map window. After they input their contact information, they can interact with the map and click on a boating access area, which then populates all of the relevant information about that boating access area in the survey itself. And then the survey, based on the data they input about start time and end time of their event, can do some date calculations and some logic on some other questions to determine whether it should be a weigh-in permit or a special use permit. When that permit is submitted, it triggers a Flow and Power Automate, which is licensed under the state's Office 365 environment, and using some of the fields that come out of the survey, we can determine if it is a weigh-in permit. Then it kind of goes through these conditions, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a direct approval of the weigh-in permit, and this is just an email directly to the requester that says, here's your permit. And then if it's a special use permit, there's an email sent to staff prompting approval, as well as an acknowledgement email sent to the submitter. And if it's not a weigh-in or a special use permit, and it goes all the way down through no, which only occurs if someone's trying to request the permit 2 years out, and which we tell them ahead of time, like, we're not going to do anything with this data. So that's the only way we get to no. This is the basic kind of general email permit that they get that's just structured with some HTML language. And we also did it through a connected service account in Outlook to save my inbox, so they're not coming from john.lovett@NC Wildlife. But we also still get those emails. And then the email notification for special use permits are sent to staff with all of the relevant information that they would need to determine whether or not to approve that permit. And one thing I wanted to mention here is if you can do some really cool stuff with dynamic URLs. So this link goes directly to the staff approval page with that permit already selected, so that they don't have to do a whole lot of clicking when they get to that page. So if you can learn about dynamic URLs, go for it, because it's awesome. Email notification, we also use some Outlook rules to forward emails appropriately. So because we capture the region that it's in, if an email comes into the mailbox that has pending special use permit in the subject and has the region in there, then it knows to forward those emails to the relevant staff members in that region. I think I'm getting a little low on time, but there's also an internal view of the same application with the same data for approval, and it looks very similar, but we also included a few more additional filters that are relevant to staff but not relevant to the public. And so they can click on a ramp or a permit and see that same permit information. We also included the ability to look at both current permits and past permits here. All of this is built on a single feature service that comes out of the Survey 123, but with a bunch of views on top of it to allow different levels of interaction and filtering based on who needs to see what. And then there's also a mobile-friendly view of this that was set up for field staff who are, would need to look at these permits from the field. And then finally, the last bit here is the actual approval part, is just an editing widget set up within the same experience builder where they can go in and just mark whether the permit is pending or change it to approved and put any comments that might be relevant there. So success, hopefully, I think so. We launched this system on January 2nd, so there was a big, this is the number of survey submissions since mid-December, when about 300 permits that were already issued were imported into the system. And then when it went live on January 2nd, there was this huge spike. This is weekly survey submissions over time. There were over 120 permits issued within the first 24 hours with no complaints. And if we assume a very conservative 5-minute processing time per permit for those 1,300 permit requests that have come in since we launched this, we've saved like 3 weeks of constant staff time. And as I mentioned, that's like, really it's more like 10 minutes per permit to get through this. The feedback from the public has been almost entirely positive. And some of the early complaints were just from people who had the old page bookmarked, and they were like, why doesn't this work anymore? Training staff to use the web application required some work, but I think they got on board pretty quick. At least I'd like to think so. No one's told me otherwise. And then just some things to keep in mind is that Outlook rules can be a little fussy, and you're obviously subject to the whims of AGOL if it decides to stop working for a couple hours or more, whether or not they tell you that it's a problem. So yeah, there's likely nothing groundbreaking here for a lot of you, but hopefully it gets you thinking about how you can use the data and tools that you already have on hand to solve problems outside of like going for like a whole new solution that may cost a lot of money or cost a lot of training time. With that, thank you. I'm happy to take any questions, and I specifically want to thank Anna Stefanowicz, who's our other GIS analyst, and then Wanda Mugo and Ryan Jacobs, who are staff that spent a lot of time helping develop this application and answering a lot of the questions as we tried to get it launched towards the end of last year. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, wait,
Sure.
let's let that fella.
I was curious as to if you could explain a few of the activities that these permits allow, like the special use. What do you see in the special use requests?
So a lot of the stuff that's actually come through, the real purpose of special use permits is for those like a construction company is going to come in and like, I think there's one issued for like a gunite company that's going to come in and like rebuild some seawalls and things like that. And so they're going to be occupying multiple parking spaces at a ramp for an extended period of time, and we just need to know about that so that we can appropriately communicate that with the public. Like if that's happening at a ramp and we know that it's going to be partially closed for construction for like 3 months, then we can put that in a note that pops up like in the services for the boating access area, so that the public, if they go and look at the map, they can see like, oh, I know that this ramp is not at full capacity. A lot of what came through actually as special use permits is people who would say, I'm having a fishing tournament for a whole weekend. Really, they're having 2 like day-long fishing tournaments. They're not there overnight. Occasionally they are, and if it's longer than 24 hours and they're actually gonna be there longer than 24 hours, we wanna know that, and then that often goes to a special use permit. But like, if you're gonna be out Saturday and Sunday from 6 to 6, it's really like a Saturday 6 to 6 permit and a Sunday 6 to 6 permit. So there's been a little bit of like back and forth with the public about requesting the right type of permit. But I don't, Anna, are there any other like things that the major events that have popped up? I think there was one that I saw where like, yeah, local government events where there's a couple ramps on the coast where like the city or town like has a festival kind of thing, and they use the boating access area property or the parking lot for part of that, and so it's shut down the ramp more or less for a day. So that would be like a special use permit there. Yeah.
I'll follow that up with possibly a loaded question. Do you have any anticipation of the conservation pass, or if Senate Bill 220 goes through, that this system
Okay, so the question was about the Conservation Access Pass and Senate Bill 220. I honestly don't know a whole lot about Senate Bill 220. I mean, I know what it is, and I've heard a variety of things about it. The Conservation Access Pass, for those who are not aware, is something that's being considered right now, essentially to require a license to access game lands or use WRC-owned boating access areas to access the water beyond, or if you don't already have a hunting or fishing license. So then the question is, like, what do we anticipate the usage of the system going up once that happens? And I mean, I don't think so, because I don't think, I mean, it's entirely possible, but I don't think it's gonna change, like, requesting to have like a fishing tournament or something like that, just because someone is required to have a license to use the ramp. It's an interesting consideration.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I had a quick question.
sure.
So, is it still a not rolling thing? Is it still January to December?
No.
Okay, so now you can book a year out?
Yeah, so I probably glazed over that a little bit, but so the question was, is this still a January 1 to December 31 system, or did we change that? And the answer is yes, we have changed that. It's now on a rolling basis. So getting back to the question you asked earlier about special use permits as well, permits within a year, if they fall under a weigh-in permit otherwise, are issued as a weigh-in permit. If you're trying to request a weigh-in permit more than a year out from today, then it is processed as a special use permit, because we're still trying to keep people from like saying, I
Booking
want
it all,
a
yes.
ramp forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a rolling basis now.
I know
There
you said
wasn't,
it would get a no-no if it was 2 years out.
if it was 2 years out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't a great way, and maybe if someone knows exactly how to handle this, but like, there's we could make a lot of pop-ups that said like, if you're asking for an event 2 years out, we're not gonna process
Yeah.
this. But at a
Stop,
certain
right.
point, like, it wouldn't prevent them from hitting submit. So then, that's why we told them as much as we could.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, interesting.
yeah,
Any other questions? All right.
yeah,
Thank
cool.
you so
All right,
much.
thank you all.